Right, thank you for coming to my talk. Can everyone hear me okay? We'll start. Right, who am I? Neil Lyons, I'm a pen tester, involved in a range of security areas. Social engineering is my favourite, which I'm going to touch on a lot today. I'm part of Team Netitude. Some of you might have seen me at other conferences I spoke at last year. Quick background. I'm interested in sort of nation-state threats, and I'm interested in what the media have to say about it, and I just like reading about it. 2016, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea were regarded as the most instant sort of threats to the West. I have a few boring slides like this where I just take quotes, but it's cyber spying, cyber espionage, basically stealing stuff that's not yours, government-led attacks, nicking other countries' information. This was an interesting quote. I will slow down in a minute. I will go through these first slides very quickly, I'll warn you now. Michael Daniel, which was the former US Special Assistant, said, "You'll never be able to prevent them all. Everything is penetrable eventually." I think that's accurate, and I liked it, and I think it was good that someone at that level admitted that publicly. Right, so what are our targets? Just because I like doing this, any ideas? Throw it out there to anyone. What sort of things will nation states be going for? Thank you. Thank you. Anything else? Brilliant stuff. They're after things of finance, things of worth. Paint, actually, ironically, I watched a documentary recently, and they're after paint patents. They like to know how things are made, and they like to then replicate it. These are the areas they're targeting most. Transport, manufacturing, retail, energy companies, financial companies, medical companies. Right. Forget 0 day, start thinking day zero. I'm sure you're all aware of the term day zero, but the idea of taking a power station down and switching off the power and causing complete chaos. This is something that scares the hell out of a lot of people, and I think it's quite an interesting area. A bit of a thing after the power went out, what happened? This is something from the media, and it was last Sunday, and it just caught my eye. Basically, it's saying that hackers potentially tried to bypass a nuclear power station defences last week, and it was caught and stopped. This is another interesting thing from the media. Apparently, they have 7,700 present active professional hackers working for them, which I think is an odd statistic. I don't know if it's true or not, but the vision that people have of North Korea is they're quite limited and they don't have much, but yet they do a lot of bad things. But theoretically, they've got 7,700 people now doing it full time. This concept, we are at war. We are being attacked all the time, and we're also attacking other people all the time, back and forwards, back and forwards. It's something that's overlooked because there's never been an official, we're under attack, but we are. This is an interesting statement that I read. To date, there has not been a single cybercrime that's regarded as bad enough to be an act of war yet. Okay, so think nation-state, cyber attacks, cyber threats. What do you think? I'll throw it out to everyone again. Nation-state, anyone, what do you think? What's the first thing that comes to your head? Sorry, what was that? Thank you, a very, very good one. I'll get back to that in a minute. Anything else? Let's think more basically. What do you think when you think nation-state? Costly, expensive, really, really advanced, incredible. I'm trying not to swear here. Sophisticated. Exactly why I said I'll come back to that. That ticked all those boxes. It was expensive. It was sophisticated. Here's my slide saying that. I have my suspicions. This isn't official, but I have my suspicions that they're not as sophisticated as you think. And I think the reality is that they could be done by a non-nation state. They could be done by an individual. Right, let's look at an example of what was regarded as a nation state. And the reason why what I'm about to show you was regarded as a nation state attack was because it was connected back to North Korea. Now, it was never proven, and you've probably all read information on it, so I'm not going to go that far into it. And you probably all watched documentaries on it. But this one here from Vice, did anyone watch it? It was very, very good. It's the cyber war on Vice. It's brilliant. They're about 25 minutes long. They're straight to the point, and they're full of lots of security experts saying things like, "We're at war," and I find it amusing. I'm quite interested in media buzzwords around things. They're really excited about it. They really sell it. It's the sexy sell. But the reality is, well, this is what happened. Right, so Guardians of Peace. I see my notes. On November the 24th, 2014, a hacker group identifying themselves as Guardians of the Peace broke into hacked Sony media. You have to get it right. What was taken? Personal information about Sony employees, emails between employees, embarrassing stuff, very embarrassingly released emails, salary information and unreleased Sony films, which is obviously connected to finance. There's money involved in that. They made a massive loss over those films being released. Right, what did the Guardians of Peace do? Now, this is what interests me, and this is where my talk's going to start changing a little bit. They got remote access to the internal network. They exploited internal misconfigurations. They hunted out users of interest, and they exploited domain admin. At that point, I lit up. I was like, what? They did what? They got domain admin. And they stole data. There's my thing of interest. It started me thinking, what is the difference between what they've done that's regarded as highly sophisticated by the media, this is like the most scary people in the world ever that the media portray, and what a general good pen tester does. So, we don't steal data, but on a good pen test, a good remote social engineering engagement, we will get access from the outside to the internal network. We will exploit internal misconfigurations. We will elevate or attack misconfigurations, common misconfigurations, and we'll exploit to become domain admin. So it got me interested. If pen testers are doing this, how sophisticated really are the so-called bad guys, the nation states? Right, boilerplate stat time. You all know this, but I'm just going to put it in anyway for the record. Generally, it takes 98 days for financial firms and 197 days for retail to detect a breach. So how long does it take to get access in? Now, this was an interesting stat that was released last year. DEF CON 2016, 88% of hackers who were asked said that basically it took 12 hours. So going back to that, 98 days, 197 days, where it takes them, on average, 12 hours to get in. I put a little bit of a sly comment at the bottom. 12 hours, I think, is a long time. I think that's quite generous to actually get access from the outside to the internal organisation and get complete compromise to domain admin level. I'll throw it out there. If anyone wants to have a go at me for saying that, say it now, otherwise I'll carry on. Right, so it got me thinking, could a single person accomplish the Sony hack? Was it sophisticated? And what would the cost be? Well, basically, it's the price of a laptop. Theoretically, I think it could be done by anyone at home with a laptop. So how to? Right, from remote internal, so for getting 0 days, because they're costly, they don't often come weaponised, so you have to know kind of what you're doing with them. Start thinking, what I'm sort of thinking is replace all that with sort of macros, OLEs, not .htas, even though I've put it on here, I will drop that from my slide, they get picked up all the time, or UNC. Now, if anyone saw my talks last year, they know I'm very interested in UNC. I'm interested in functionality. I'm interested in exploiting what is there, what can we do with it, what will not get picked up by AV, what can slip past, that's what I'm interested in. Right, I'm going to start off with a video. At this point, I might walk around. I pre-warn now. Hello. Oh, that's a bit scary. Right, first video here we've got is a macro. Now, the user has to click enable macro for it to work. While clicking it, it makes a call back to the remote machine over here, which is Kali. Now, as you can see, I've got a session from that machine. From clicking that, it has enabled me to have a session remotely to their machine. At this point, I drop into Shell just so you can see here, what can you do? Well, there we are, we're on the Kali box and we're connecting back to the machine, the Windows box here. So that gives you full access as that standard user to that machine just from the second I've clicked enable on the macro. I'm not going to show you how to create macros at this point. I've released it all on my blog, which I'll tell everyone about at the end so you can see exactly how this is all done. I'd like to fast forward a bit of these videos, but I'll have to wait. Right, the next one I'm going to show is an OLE. Now, OLEs are starting, well, they've been exploited for about the last couple of years, and it does a link. Now, when you double click it there, the shortcut, it opens up PowerShell, which runs a command back to the Kali box. At that point, you get a shell off the box. So you saw just from a user double clicking that, you've got remote access to that machine. I personally think OLEs look a bit odd. If I received a Word document or a PowerPoint document or any kind of document with another document embedded in it, I wouldn't click on it. But from tests that we do at work and that I've done myself, I know that people do and I know it works. Macros and OLEs are very, very successful. Right, the next one is UNC. I've got responder going. Just from opening the Word document, we've received there the machine name or domain name when it's domain connected, but also the username and the password hash. What happens is when you open UNC, it makes an SMB request back to the machine, which obviously responder responds back to it, and then it goes, great, have my username, have my password hash. So what I wanted to show you there was 3 ways, which the third way doesn't give you direct access into an internal network, but the first 2 do. Now, what I find, can I go back to here now? What I find is a lot of places, after you get a hash, and you reverse the hash, I don't want to go too much into this now because I will do it in my talk, they still have SSL VPNs on the outside or Citrix boxes with single-factor authentication. So just getting creds can give you a pivot into the network. I do it all the time, so it's scary. A macro is probably the ultimate way in, but without credentials, it's not that useful, which I'll get back into later. Right, UNC is something that interests me. Here's another very quick demo of it. So there's a cloned website of a famous dating website. Now, just from viewing the site, so refreshing the browser, I'll have to hit play. Just from refreshing the browser, so not putting any credentials in whatsoever, we're getting creds. So we get a hash just from viewing it. Now, what I'll show you in this video is, look at the source code, and if you zoom in, right at the bottom, there's an SMB request. Now, I'm going to zoom in on that because you're not going to be able to see that from there. So that's, if you can, I don't know if you can all see that, but literally it's just a file share request to a fictional image that's not really there. But Microsoft, it's a legitimate functionality. Microsoft doesn't know the difference. It'll just make the request out. And if 445 outbound is open on your firewall and you're using Internet Explorer, that's going to happen, and it does happen a lot on tests. Right, so quickly talking about UNC, cracking hashes. Now, I'm not here to sell this, it's free anyway, but I'm not here to promote this today, but we released a dictionary called Rocktastic that's got 1 billion unique combinations. Cracking hashes isn't really a problem. A lot of people will say, well, why don't you use rules? I do use rules. I use rules with it, but I will try the dictionary first, and then I will use rules if required. Rules don't add football teams, they don't add towns, they don't add city names, they don't add the top 1,000 male and female names to it. They are also incredibly slow. Now, I hear people say, well, I don't really care about it being slow because I've got one of these sitting at home. Well, personally, I haven't got a 10 grand rig at home that I use purely for cracking hashes. I wish I had, but my wife is not going to let me buy one of those. The reality is that's what I've got, and it's here now, my Lenovo laptop, and a lot of us have corporate laptops. They're hideous, but we have them, and this is what we have. Right, final point before I talk about the internal side. So what you have to say from this, you've all got it anyway, but we've now got from the outside to the inside at this point, and we've got creds, we've got hashes. You could do, it's ugly as hell this is, and in a minute I'm about to show you a more pretty looking email, but the reality is you can add a macro, you can add an OLE and a UNC all into the same Word document, so you can really, really weaponize these things. Now that's a more pretty document, and that's the sort of one that will be used on engagements. Now the reason why I say I use this on engagements is because I know this has been used in the wild. This is the sort of thing that the media have put on their blogs about this is what happened and this is what we've looked at and what we've received. So it's just ways of enticing people to hit macro. This is a good example of OLE. It's a recruitment Word document. So you just put in the email, open the document for more information, and you just write a bit of speech there about how underneath these are all the individual jobs and each one would be its own OLE. They do work. They work very well. Are there any questions about that one going along? This is good. This is good. I'm getting through quick. I'll make it quite short. Right, so we've gone from the outside and we're on the inside. Now, this is going to be a bit painful for PowerShell people here. I recently discovered a love for PowerShell. I'm quite slow and I'm quite set in my ways. I've been using Metasploit for a long time and I didn't want to move over to something else. I had a process that worked for me, and it does work. It still works. But I'm starting to change it now more to PowerShell and using less of Metasploit. But what I'm about to show you now is the Metasploit process that I have done for the last 2 or 3 years. So we've got creds and we've got a remote shell onto an internal box. Now, so let's pretend here's the shell. And what would you do once you've got access to a shell? Well, the first thing you want to start looking for is misconfigurations. For this, I typically would use SMB login with the credentials. Now, I'll start running this. I apologise if this is very basic for everyone here, but I'm going to go through the whole process. So you add the username that we got, we add the password. And you add the subnet. I'm always interested in module scripts that allow you to set the R hosts. I like the idea of summarization, the fact that you can just spray it out against an entire subnet. I always think that's very, very interesting. Right, hit run now. What we're looking for any user with local administrative access. Local administrative access is gold dust. It allows you to use PSExec against the box. It also means you've got a good chance against system when you run PSExec on that box and you do get system. How often does this happen? Well, if I get creds and I've come from the outside to the internal side, it's common. It's common that you'll find, if you spray it out over a /24, it's common that you'll find 1 or 2 boxes where that user has been given local admin rights. Why have they been given local admin rights on that box? There's lots of reasons. Just misconfiguration for one. The fact that maybe they had to have rights to install something on that box, or let's say they're a developer and they need it for a certain reason. It's just incredibly common, I find. Right, so once you get access to it, you can use PSExec. I'm not going to talk about what PSExec is. A lot of you here will know, but it's on the slide. And that is how, if you didn't know how to, that's how you configure PSExec. PSExec, I will say quickly, it's like Telnet. It gives you access to the machine. Now, the reason why you want access to that machine is because that user, that cred you've got, has got local admin rights on that machine. So that's why that is of instant interest to you. Now, this video here, very quickly, if I can show you, there's no fast forward option on here, is just me using PSExec, just in case anyone hadn't seen it before. PSExec, what I can say is about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, changed it from dropping a shell to the box to PowerShell, which is fantastic because it automatically bypasses antivirus. Before this, I used to use something called Veal or Shelter to make a payload that would slip past antivirus, but now it just automatically slips past antivirus, which is great over PowerShell. This is something interesting I've noticed. When they swapped it to PowerShell, when you run it, I'd say 20% of the time you don't get a session back immediately. Now, what I found is if it lights up green like a Christmas tree, as I say, just run it again. And what you find is that on the second attempt, you will get a shell or access. Right, GetSystem is not an exploit. It's an attempt to personate a security context with system rights. If this works, you get system. I have to remind myself of that because I'm quite capable of saying it is an exploit, and of course it's not. But what happens when you run GetSystem and it doesn't work? Now, this is the bit when I start to get really upset. I like it when it's easy. 50% of the time it is, 50% of the time it's not. Now, it's probably more interesting when it's not easy. So, when it doesn't work, Privesc, as people keep telling me, and I'm getting a lot stronger at. These are typical ways of Privesc. MS16 032 is regarded as quite successful. UAC exploits is another one. User access control will stop you from getting system. It's very good for that. I recommend to people that they turn it on. It's that annoying thing that pops up and says, are you sure you want to do this? I would recommend having it because it's one of the things that stops us from getting system. Harmjoy's Power Up is also another good way. Now, I'm going to talk about some PowerShell sort of other tricks in a bit later, and not at the moment though. Right, so pretending one of those had just worked, I'm not showing you videos for everything. So we have hashes now. Right, so quick updates. We've got access from the outside to the inside. We've exploited internal misconfiguration, share files with local administrative rights, and we've got hashes. What can we do now? Okay, it's time to start hunting out the domain admin, the DA. Okay, just in case someone doesn't know here, what is a DA? It's the keys to the castle. It's the highest privilege level of a single domain. It's access to all domain joined resources. It just gives you access to everything that's on the domain. Right, the first thing you want to do when you're hunting out domain admin is instantly log out of Nessus. If you're tempted to use it, uninstall it. That's just my personal opinion. Start to listen to traffic, know your tools. I call this the clone. It's incorrect. Passing the hash is the actual official term. Now, why does Microsoft not salt passwords? I'll get to the reason why pass the hashing works is because they don't salt passwords. So if you have a password hash from one box the local administrative hash, and they've cloned that box over and over and over again, that same password hash is going to be on all the other boxes. Now, the reason why they don't salt hashes is because of backward compatibility. They just can't do it. It would break it. And that is why still today they're not doing it. So they're fully capable of doing it. They just don't for compatibility reasons. So Microsoft engineer comes along, builds one machine, really likes it, clones that machine over and over and over again. And then on the final day, he's off sick and someone else comes down, doesn't know he clones it, so he builds his own machine. So what happens is we come along with hashes and we can access that machine, that machine, that machine, that machine, not that one because he was off that day, but we can access that machine with that same hash. And people will keep saying, pass the hash is dead. It's not. I keep seeing it on tests. It just keeps coming up and up and up. It's the point where I would believe if any nation state was going to do it, they could just use this. It's going to work. And why would you not use something that works? Yes, it's noisy. Some of you might be thinking, is this noisy? Is it not? It is noisy. I find a lot of people don't log properly, or they don't have a SIEM. They have no way of having alerted messages. So a lot of attackers know this. If you were trying to attack someone who made paint, let's just say, as an example, what's the likelihood that they're going to think a nation state's going to attack them? And secondly, what's the likelihood, because they don't have to be PCI compliant, they don't have to be government, any of the kind of compliancy from that, what's the likelihood they're going to have logging? It's quite slim. Also, criminals are starting to catch up, worth noting. 2016, there's been reports, a lot of people talk about ransomware, and it'll affect a single box. Well, no, they're starting to use pass the hash now. So they encrypt one, they encrypt your files on one box, they'll then jump to all your other boxes if they can using this exact process, and they'll encrypt all of your boxes, which is really scary. Also, pen testers use it all the time. Right, this is a fantastic tool that I've used for quite a long time, SMB exec. What SMB exec allows you to do is stick the username in with the password hash. You don't have to reverse the password hash. And it lets you check for system admins. Does anyone here use this? It's brilliant. I've been using it for a long time. It's really, really good. What it'll do is it'll spray out those hashes against the entire network, your subnets that you have defined, and it will log into all those machines using the hash that you've given it where it can log into. And it will run a command looking for domain admins, obviously that's what it's for. And then it'll give you back a list of all the IP addresses where the domain admins are and their name. Now, if it can do that, Pierce exec can get onto that box. So after running it, I see admins everywhere, domain admins everywhere. It's quite scary. Every test after test that I do, from the outside, you get into the inside, and you just think, why are you all logged in as domain admin? It can be ranging from 2 to 4 users, right the way up to 20 of their IT team. It's just like, there seems to be this broken idea that if you're an administrator on a Windows domain, you have to have domain admin rights to administer it. And, well, you don't. So when should a domain DA account be used? And I was going to throw these questions to you, but I don't think it's fair. But a lot of people will say, like, password resets, installing software. This is all incorrect. You can use delegation of permissions. I call it delegation of rights, and I always get it wrong. Microsoft delegation of permissions. And you can say that admin has rights to install this software. That admin has rights to change passwords. That admin can change passwords and install software. Can they have domain admin rights? Hell no. I'm not going to trust them with that. That's the keys to the castle. Domain admin, and I asked someone a lot smarter than me about this. I said, when should it actually be used? And he said, simple. When you set up your domain and when it absolutely hits the fan. That's when you should be using domain admin. Sorry, I feel like I'm preaching. So, you found domain admin. How do you exploit it? So you've used SMB exec, you've spotted where they're all hidden, you use Pierce exec to those boxes, and you've got remote access to those boxes, and then you've got this incredible tool, Mimikatz. Now, you're all here going to know about Mimikatz, but just in case, I want to show a video. Right, so we're on the box via Pierce exec where the domain admin's sitting, and I'm going to use the post exploit of Mimikatz in Metasploit and run it, and there you go. There's your domain admin at the bottom. Now, this works up to 2009 server and Windows 7, and it always makes me excited when I see a 2009 box with a DA on it, because I'm straight to that box and I'm running this. Now, I'll use SMB version, and I will double check the machine, and if it says like 2012 or 2016, I was like, oh crap. But I'm going to get to that in a minute. So people are starting to have Windows 10, and I'm finding lots of people with Surfaces. I'm turning up to sort of offices now, if you're ever doing internal, or if you're remote and you check what the machine is, you find that, I suspect that's a Surface. And it has full-fat Windows 10 on it. Now, Windows 10 and Windows 2012 onwards, they changed the registry settings in Microsoft that will not allow you to instantly request in memory what the presently authenticated user's password is. So Mimikatz doesn't work. But what you can use, and I found this out very recently by fluke, someone said to me, just use Keylogger. Now, the Keylogger built into Metasploit will instantly pick up antivirus. And then I Googled it, and it was like, lockout Keylogger. This worked brilliantly. Post module, ran it, and it waits 130 seconds, I believe, and it counts down, so it's not instant, it doesn't instantly lock their machine. It waits for an idle period of 130 seconds, and then it automatically pretends to lock their screen. And when they log back in, you see their credentials, and bang, it worked. So old school tricks are working against new school boxes. It's quite interesting. There is also, which I'm going to talk to in a little bit, called POSH-C2, which my friend developed, who's sitting there probably annoyed with me now for pointing him out. Cred Popper, which is the same kind of principle, isn't it? Silence. Right, so common password choices for domain admin. So where domain admin is used, what would you expect would be a really good password choice for a domain admin? Something complex, a lot of characters, passphrase, really good password. I see loads of passwords, 2015, retest them next year, it's 2016. It's like Microsoft complexity says uppercase, lowercase, and a special character or a number. I just see it all the time, really, really weak passwords. So you can use Mimikatz anyway, but the thing is, if you use SMB login, you're going to, with just a weak password and spray it out against the subnet, the chances are you're probably going to get domain admin as well, because the choice of domain admin passwords that I've seen for the last 2 or 3 years is shocking. Right, a quick recap. So we've got access from the outside, we're on the inside, we've exploited misconfigurations, and we're now domain admin. What do you do next? This is the bit where I try and hunt out the domain controllers. Now, there are post-module scripts in Metasploit to do this, and there's lots of scripts to do this, but I just like to quickly do an ipconfig all, and I look at the DNS server. And I was told this by a pen tester years ago. Basically, when you're configuring Active Directory, a lot of people press next, 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 or DC promo, then next, 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 next. Now, what happens is, one of the configurations doing that is it asks you what's the IP address of your DNS server, or automatically, if you just press next, it will allow you to have that as the DNS server. Now, someone also said to me, I don't know if this is true, the DC theoretically has to be the DNS box. But thank you, you're agreeing. There you go, that's the answer, it has to be. So this is why, when you do an ipconfig all, it's very likely that your DNS box will be your DC, and often you'll see 2. Now, at this point, you can RDP to it, because you've got the domain admin creds. You can RDP to it. Or alternatively, you can pierce exec to it. Pierce execing it is fantastic. Now, this is the bit that I absolutely love. This bit gets me every time. When you do a hash dump, I would pause this, but I'll do it I'll explain in a minute, because I can't actually pause it whilst in this mode. But if I do a hash dump now, I call this like the fruit machine, it's dropping, you've got the jackpot. Here we go. And it goes on and on and on and on. Now, someone very smart might be able to spot that these hashes are replicating. That's because this is a lab box in my house. I'm not just going to show you any client stuff here. But it's also interesting because I had the same password for every user. And if you look at the hashes in a minute when it stops, they're all the same. Because again, I'll reinforce, Microsoft doesn't sell passwords. Now, an interesting comment about this, why it's still chugging and chugging and chugging. An attacker wouldn't do this. They just do it. They wouldn't care. But I always ask a client at this point, do you have multiple DCs? I can see 2 here, but do you have any more? Is there any one you would particularly preference that I do this on? Now, obviously, they all replicate, so it's the same data on each one. But the reason why I ask them that is because in my experience of doing this, twice this has made a DC bounce just from running hash dump. So I always pre-warn that it is low risk, but there is a potential risk. I just think it's always worth noting to people. Right, so you've got the hashes. You can crack all those with your chosen dictionary. I use Rocktastic. What do you then do? Looking at share folders is always a good point. Now, if you can find an organisation chart, quite often put on their websites or somewhere you can find it, generally in a share folder. You've got access to everything at this point. Yes, domain admin gives you theoretically access to everything, but it's nice to then target individual people where you've got their hashes, and Microsoft will allow you to pass the hash. Or you can crack it. So you can start targeting the CEO, you can start targeting, I don't know, human resources is always a great one, reading the emails there. You're going to find your juicy documents there. It's exactly what Guardians of Peace wanted to do with Sony. Okay, so on average, this is what I found. To get from nothing, from sending an email in, it takes between 30 minutes to 4 hours. So that's I think, quite a relatively short amount of time. That's why I did that at the start. Why does it take, sort of mocked a bit the fact that it takes 12 hours? I don't think it takes 12 hours personally. Right, that was the old process. And if I had rewritten this, I started this talk writing it probably about 6 months ago. If I know what I know today, I would have written it a bit differently. There's a lot quicker ways. I knew this previously, by the way. Groups XML. Groups XML, any standard user can mount a share on the domain controller. That's how the DCs work. Normally they can. By default they can. Now, if a standard user is to mount a share on the DC, and if you look at number 3 there, that's the location. It's under the policies directory. If you look for group XML or schedule tasks XML or services XML, they're great. They're encrypted with AES. The passwords are in these documents. What it is it contains the username and the password. Now, quite often it is the domain admin in those documents, or alternatively, it's a local admin, but even so, it's of high level value to an attacker. Microsoft encrypted the key. I have the exact date, do I hear? No, I don't. At some point, they released this, which I'm not sure if you can see there. That's the key. They released the key. My friend's laughing. He instantly, yeah. Well, we've got the key, so we can now reverse them. I'm sure someone got a kick that day from Microsoft for that. Once it's released, it's out there. There's nothing you can do about it. So we will go as a standard user. We can mount these directories. We can download a copy of the group XML file. It's just a Word document, a text document, I should say. And if you look there in yellow, what I've highlighted is the username and the password hash. And underneath, I'm using a tool built into Kali, which is just one of the Ruby scripts built into the Metasploit framework. And you literally just run that command, and it reverses the document for you, the hash in the document. It reverses it for you. And you can see there you go, the password is let's get hacking. It takes about 2 minutes to run. Every time I run it, I always think, is it going to work? 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 Of course it's going to work. It's the same every time. They've got the key. But it always takes a few minutes. Right, KB2962486, just rolls off the tongue, that one. I need a tattoo of it. Prevents new credentials from being placed in the group's policy preference. So your group's XML files, if you run that update, you can no longer do that. It doesn't let you. But what it doesn't do, this is the catcher, it doesn't go back and delete them, because if you delete them, services will stop working. So a lot of people will run this update thinking, that's fixed it. But in reality, it hasn't. So any standard user on your network now can mount that directory, they can rip those files back, they can reverse the password because Microsoft released the key, and they can use whatever level of privileges that account has. That is what I think is one of the more rapid ways to getting domain admin once you land on a box. This is the new one, and this is the one that blew my mind. Tim Medium revealed Kerberoasting to the world. Now, it's been implemented into a lot of frameworks already. Now, Kerberoasting, every user has the rights to request service account information from the domain controller, including the password hash. That is it doesn't roll off the tongue, that, and that's scary as hell. So any standard user can do this. It's just functionality. Now, it used to be complex. We were talking about this earlier, me and my friends were. It used to be like a 4-step process to doing it. It was complex, and it would probably break, and you'd get frustrated and headbutt the wall and give up and think it was too complex. Well, it's been made incredibly simple now. But before I explain the reason why it's been made simple, I was being asked to add this slide. Kerberos provides secure user authentication with an industry standard that permits intercompatibility. Basically, Win2K, it was implemented in Win2K, and for backwards compatibility, they're going to use it, and they're going to keep using it and using it and using it, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now, the only real fix for this is to make sure that your service accounts have really, really strong passwords. Now, it's worth mentioning that service accounts 9 times out of 10 do not have the password set to run out. And secondly, they were often configured years and years and years and years ago, well before complexity was ever enforced in a corporate environment. And for that reason, they're often shockingly weak passwords. Actually, this is one of the few exceptions where hashes and the Rocktastic dictionary don't work, because that's all about complexity, where these, you just want to run Rockyou on them. Really, really shocking, like password of password. All lowercase, services, and the password is services. It's things like that. It's really bad. They're often also in the domain admin group. So I won't explain that. Right, Hashcat has included support now for cracking these. And this is one of the new frameworks that's come up, and I think is brilliant. It's PoshC2, and it's created by my friend, Ben Turner and David Hardy. The Twitter's there, if anyone's interested in following them. What was implemented into that was this underneath. You can see, all you do is you literally get access to a machine, you get a shell on it using PoshC2. So the same, it's a macro, you can use a macro to get access to a machine using PoshC2. And then all you have to do is run invoke Kerberos, output format, hashcat select object, there you go. And hit go, and wait about a second or two later, and if it's worked, you get your hashes back. There you go, quick explanation on how to do it. This is quite scary, so you can send an email in, run that, and be a domain admin without doing anything, just from sitting at home, within minutes. Right, so I took a look back. This is the reason why I am getting really, really into using PowerShell. And in a year's time, if you hopefully come and see another talk that I do, it'll be basically just about PowerShell. But right, I took a look back over the last few months, and statistic-wise here, I'm just going to throw it. I did 14 internal infrastructure tests, 7 remote social engineering tests, and I'm not lazy. I also do web apps and everything else that's thrown at me on top. Of that, 21 tests, 17 of them I got domain admin. It's really, really common. Why do you not get domain admin? Generally, if it's a PCI test, and it's just like red hat boxes. If it's a Windows domain, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get it. If it's a remote one and you've got a social engineering engagement, you're going to get in, you're going to get it. Okay, so this is the bit when it gets more interesting. I'm not sure how much time I've got left. 10 minutes, thank you. When it fails, and you might start considering, if you're a nation state, you're going to think, time to travel, time to get on an aeroplane. This is the 3rd time ever in my life I've been on an aeroplane to get here today. Right, why risk it for a biscuit, as my daughter said? If you don't want to try and instantly rock up at their site and get access in if you don't need to. So what are some of the possible better ways of doing this, more savvy ways of doing it? This is something that I was toying with last year, and I've not spoken about this to anyone really so far. While doing a lot of internal testing, I noticed that people use wireless, obviously guest wireless is very, very common, everyone has a guest wireless. Now, it's often segmented correctly from the internal wireless, which is great, it's all done properly. So what's the danger? Well, generally guest wireless networks are just open, or if they have a pierce key, it's a weak word like hello 2017 or something like that, or I don't know, wireless, anything. Or it has a 4-digit PIN. The 4-digit PINs you can brute force with burp, and there's no lockouts on. The Cisco one has no lockout, so you just literally run through it, it takes about 4 seconds and bang, you're in. If segmented correctly, where is the risk? Well, it's common to find corporate users on the guest, which is insane, but it happens. So you can be sitting outside and you can be looking at the wireless networks and you'll see corporate users actually connected to the guest network all the time. Now, why do they do that? Well, if you ever turn up to a site on your very first day, a lot of IT people will put you on it just for ease of use. It's quicker and easy to use. Sometimes it has direct internet access out, and people like that because the restrictions aren't there. Microsoft doesn't forget, so if it's ever connected, it will always try and connect back to it when it sees it. Now, people will say, well, they don't broadcast very far. What's the problem? Well, I started researching this, and I was looking at this. These parabolic grid 24 dBi directional antennas, they're about 37 quid, and you can plug them straight into one of these Alpha cards. These are pretty scary stuff. I'm about to show you the amount of distance that this thing can see an SSID from. Now, instantly, it's worth a bit of a laugh, I think. Now, I looked at it, I was like, whoa, that's pretty scary. Now, instantly, anyone who does wireless is going to turn around and go, well, that's rubbish, because it can't broadcast back. Now, you're right. You can see it, but they won't have the power probably to broadcast back to you. But it's still interesting that you could just be sitting miles away and start doing a bit of recon on these people, start to see what they've got. And you'll be able to see corporate users on it, so you know if it's worth doing or not. What would be more realistic would be one of these, the kind of Pringle can things. Now, they can work up to 2 miles away, but you literally just sit across the road or in the park just a few minutes down the road, especially in London, this would be really easy to do. And it plugs into an Alpha card. So corporate users are on the guest Wi-Fi. What I would do, and what I have done to prove this actually does work, is connect to the guest wireless, fire up Responder, which is incredible. You get hashes, Rocktastic to crack them, and then I use Fierce DNS. Now, I picked up Fierce DNS about 2 years ago, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. I can't believe I hadn't used it for years. It's just these stupid tools that we should be using all the time. We sometimes just ignore them. But First DNS is fantastic. You put the domain name in, and a second or two later, it'll pop out the SSL VPN name, OWA, or their Office 365 potential domain name. Now, what's interesting is you've got creds. So you've just connected to their corporate, their guest network, and you now know their external SSL VPN domain name is this, and their OWA domain name is this. So you just connect to it using those creds. So you're just literally sitting in the park across the road and you've got access to internal data. The VPN thing is really common. So I said it earlier, single factor authentication on VPNs is scarily common. Right, when it just doesn't work. This is the thing, I do a lot of internal SE as well. And if it all fails and you've got to walk in, tailgating at 4:45 in the morning, when we got the tram down, we saw a load of offices from the airport. We passed a load of corporate offices, and I could see through the doors we went past. No turnstiles. People walking in, tailgate, just literally queues of people, 8:45 walking in. Instantly, I just knew you could just walk straight into there, straight into the lift, straight upstairs. And this just happens over and over again. It's very rare that you get stopped, actually, if you try and get access into a physical building. There is exceptions, but even the most extreme places can be got into. Turnstiles is a hindrance. But what someone suggested to me is just say you've nipped out to get your food, going at lunchtime. And yeah, it works. If you just walk in looking a bit shifty and a bit of a rush on your mobile phone, you've got your food in your hand, and just say, come on, mate, I left my pass on my desk, will you let me in? They open the gates for you. It just happens all the time. And if it doesn't, I've had this where the front door wouldn't allow me. So I just quickly ran around the back and went around the back door and said exactly the same thing to them. They're like, yeah, fine, let you in. Right, so you're on site. Find a place to hide. I tend to just sit in the middle of an office. I used to when I first got there. I used to be really shifty and sort of go and hide in a really small little place. Now I just sit right in the middle. I start talking to people quite happily. People don't expect that person. They think, who is it? They think it's a bit of a cocky person, but they don't generally think you're malicious. Right, map drives cause broadcasts. This is something that you'll see if you do a lot of, or if you get access to an internal network, or if you do a lot of internal testing. On this screen here, you can see Responder, and here I've got a Windows 7 machine starting up, which is an exact replica of a kind of domain machine. Now, just from starting up the Windows machine, you're going to see a hash. So just from being on the same network and that machine starting, you've got a hash. Now, I'll explain the reason why. You've got another one. Again, with it just going into the desktop, you've got a hash. Now, in a minute, I'm going to go to my documents, and you get a hash. And you see where I'm going with this. Clicking on documents again, you get a hash. Now, this machine is broadcasting out all the time. It's filthy. It's going, where are you? I'm here. Responder's there saying, I'm here. Send me your authentication to connect to me. Now, the reason why it's doing this is because we've got a map share. If you look there, you won't see it very well, but that share there, I just highlighted it a little bit, is always broadcasting out. Now, loads of people have map shares. It's just what we do. Map shares cause broadcasts. Broadcasts can be responded to. Responded ends up with you getting creds. Right, when Responder doesn't work, and you're on the internal physical side, what do you do? Well, this is when it kind of gets a bit of a challenge. It's actually quite enjoyable, though, because it's different. It gives you a chance to think. Cold boot attacks, really, really common. People don't encrypt PCs. They encrypt laptops, not PCs. I've got 5 minutes to go. Does anyone have questions? Or do you want me to quickly carry on, very quickly go through it? We have time for questions. Wicked. Right, boot off Kali. Go to the config directory. You copy the SAM and the system file. Use pwdump. You've got the hash. This is great. Sometimes people put BIOS protections on. I've done this once. I'm not going to say I've done this hundreds of times. I've done it once. On an SE test, I've cracked open a box in the middle of an office, and I've had my phone out Googling how to reset the BIOS settings on this machine, and I've done it in the middle of an office with people walking past me, me going, hi, and it worked. No one stopped me. Now, I'm 6'6". I've got ginger hair. I stand out. It's like, but yeah, no one stopped me. Right. Grabbing SAM bypasses, doing that, grabbing straight to the local administrative account is what you're grabbing from that box physically. That bypasses the requirement for Responder, domain user password cracking, domain user share rights, and it does feel slightly like cheating, but that's just fun. Right, if that all fails, you can finally reinstall Nessus and fire it up. Are there any questions? Come on, please, someone, a question. Even if you just say it was the most insane thing I've ever seen. That's a scary... Oh, sorry, I believe the question was, what would you recommend an enterprise does to stop these kind of attacks? So, Well, people used to always historically say it's about training of employees, train the employees to spot suspicious things. I do agree. I agree that there's a level of that. People should be told if anything's unusual, report it. Don't forward it to the entire company, which is what I found a lot of the time people will do. Put your UNC image into an email and send it into an environment via their SMTP service on the outside, so it looks like it's come from an internal source. Outlook will automatically accept it and just open that image and send the request out. Someone forwarded that to everyone in the business. And I went from having like 3 hashes to having like 1,500. It's just, don't do that. Delete the message. Some people say you shouldn't delete it though. I think we need to have appliances, email proxies, firewalls. I'm not here to talk about vendors, but there is firewalls out there that do application layer checking, which will stop any reverse connection back if it's not from a browser. Now, we discussed in this earlier, there's ways around this, but you've got to start being pretty clever to get around these things. And a lot of like the kind of nation state ones wouldn't get around this initially. They'll find a way around it eventually. They'll realise what's blocking them. But I think you should have layers of hardening, physical devices that do this and have good trained employees to actually configure them, as well as internal training. Because it's very quick to just blame people, go, you clicked on it, it's your fault. And that's wrong. It's not. It's also your fault for having an infrastructure that allowed them to get to the point where it got to them with ease. And secondly, they're not having good training internal to say this isn't right. If you receive any email that you don't think is right, you should question it. You should. Don't blindly open it. Recruitment emails, I use those all the time. And people open them. And people like to be, someone said to me, people like to be made to feel special. They like to be made to feel wanted, important. If you tick those boxes, and I feel a bit of pain as I say it, but if you tick them boxes, people will do it and they will open it. But you need to tell people that you're at work, don't be opening stuff from recruitment people in my place. That's not normal. But again, have devices, email proxy, email protection. I don't want to mention the name, but there's a big couple of vendors who have this sort of protection, and also firewall, application layer firewalls. Are there any more questions? Sorry. I haven't. I just do SOE testing. I'm not part of, I don't do red teaming. I was discussing this earlier. We do red teaming as a business. We do a lot of it. I just do what I call quick and dirty grabs. Get in within half an hour, domain admin, put it in a report. That's what I do. I haven't had any, I've had a few that are good challenges, and they've got email protection. They've got proxy, the email, I don't want to say the name. Do you know what I'm getting at? And they have application layer firewalls. They give me the biggest amount of grief. But there's ways around them. It's not trivial to do, but eventually you have to pick up a phone actually and start talking to people that really don't like doing that. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. Just before I go, a cheeky advert. There's my Twitter. If anyone wants to send me any questions at any point, I do reply. And I have a blog as well, which is My Exploits 2600, which is my YouTube blog. And that has all the videos I've shown you now, and I'll show you how to make them all, if anyone's interested in making them. Thank you, everyone.